Marvelous hello, friends and loved ones! You know what? Sometimes I think the universe just likes seeing me be wrong. I can look back at some of my old videos and find a treasure trove of poorly aged things that I've said, but sometimes I like to think I can use that power for good. Like, who'd have thought that not even a year after I said, unlike the first three titles, Legend of Mana has never really gotten any ports, remakes, or re-releases, except for in 2011 when it was put onto the PlayStation Network. That an updated version of this beloved cult classic would be announced during a Nintendo Direct. So here I am, just over a year later, to talk about it again. It's Legend of Mana Remastered. Also, yes, I'm saying Mana again, because I've discovered that no matter which way I pronounce it, people are gonna tell me I'm saying it wrong. Just be thankful I'm not saying Legend of Mane just to annoy everybody. For those of you that don't know, Legend of Mana is my favorite video game. The short and sweet answer as to why is fantastic world building, gorgeous visuals, well-written stories, and top-notch music. And that's actually why I'm making this video on the remaster, to answer what I think is a very important question. I'm aware this might not be the most popular opinion, but I'm a firm believer that the main purpose of a remake, remaster, or any sort of re-release is to become the definitive version of a game, and basically make the old one obsolete. This is generally easier said than done, because what makes an old version worth revisiting is pretty much always going to be a subjective thing. For example, I think most of us would agree that Pokémon Fire Red and Leaf Green improved upon the original Pokémon games in pretty much every single way. But there will always be people, myself included, who might want to go back to those first Gen 1 titles, despite, and possibly even because of, its limitations. But then you have a game like Persona 3, where with the release of FES, I can't personally think of any reason to play the original, outside of maybe curiosity to see what isn't there. The point that I'm laboriously getting to is that this video is not going to be an in-depth look at Legend of Mana as a game. I already did that last year, and trust me when I say my opinions have not changed much since then. I also highly recommend watching that video if you haven't already, because I will be calling back to things I talked about last year. The purpose of this video is to answer one simple question. If Legend of Mana is my favorite game, do I think this remaster manages to top it? Do I think that this new version is the definitive version of Legend of Mana? Is this game, right here, right now, my favorite video game of all time? And I think the best way to find that out is to look at what makes this new version different and go from there. Let's start with the actual game. While sadly Legend of Mana Remastered was only released digitally in the States, physical copies with the full English text do exist and are available via a number of import sites. While all the footage you're seeing in this video comes from my PS4 copy that I bought to still support the game stateside, I did grab myself a copy of the Collector's Edition on the Nintendo Switch. The Collector's Edition comes with this gorgeous box, a soundtrack, a really nice art book, and of course a Lil Cactus plushie, which I love and will definitely be adding to the filming couch, and probably already have by the time you're watching this. Yep. In my previous video, most of the footage was recorded with the female protagonist, but this time I went ahead and used the guy, and I did what I never do with Persona outside of the first one. I gave him his manga name, Toto. Oh yeah, there's a Legend of Mana manga. It's really weird and kinda crazy, and I sort of love it. I might have to do a video on it. Also, much like Persona, Toto and the female protagonist Imu will probably be getting proper canonical names in the upcoming Legend of Mana anime series, The Teardrop Crystal. Yeah, Legend of Mana is getting an anime. I'm definitely psyched for this, especially if it's in the style of the absolutely gorgeous opening cinematic this remaster gave us. From Boyd yelling at Niccolo to Imu's panty shot, it really is the gift that keeps on giving, isn't it? Speaking of, since one of the most notable features of Legend of Mana is its visuals, let's take a look at those first, shall we? Now, I'll confess that one of the very first things I noticed from the original trailers was an incredibly petty complaint that basically boiled down to me going,
No, I don't like the font.
However, I'm happy to say that once I started playing, the font is perfectly fine. I never really had any problems with it. One other thing I noticed from the earlier trailers was some of the character portraits just didn't look very good, especially Elazul. I mean, just look at that. However, once again, I'm happy to say the trailer may have been showing an early stage of development, because pretty much everybody's portrait in the final game looks great. A few even look noticeably better, like Sandra and Pearl. The remastered backgrounds are positively gorgeous, but I do feel as though the sprites didn't get quite the same level of attention, so it does look slightly off-putting. Like, in the original PS1 game, all the sprites felt like they were a natural part of the world, but now that their art styles clash a bit more, they look more like they've been placed on top of the maps rather than being a natural part of them. The game still looks good, but I do think it could have looked better. There's one very, very small visual change this remaster offers that I really liked. In the Bejeweled City, when you're collecting gemstones, each jewel now has a unique shape instead of just being different colors like they were in the original. It may not mean much to the average player, but my dad is actually colorblind, so even though he'll never play this game, the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to highlight how much of an improvement this minor change truly is, even if it's not something that would matter to most of us. My only real complaint with the visuals, which I am going to acknowledge is more of a nitpick than anything, is this weird gap that exists behind all the character portraits. In the original game, the portraits were right up against the edge of the text box, but not here. I'm not necessarily mad about it or anything, but I never stopped noticing it, so I figured I should bring it up in a discussion where I'm weighing my personal pros and cons. Which brings me to the script. Let's rip this band-aid off quickly. Yes, it's different. I know as someone who's been playing this game for over 20 years that almost anything I have to say about the changes might come across as me just being a fanboy clinging to my nostalgia. So I will say, yes, when you've been playing the game for decades and know so many of these lines by heart, it can be a little jarring to suddenly read something different from what you're used to. There are some lines that I think were made better, like some of the Jumi stuff, particularly with Esmeralda, a character I already loved. And then there are bits that I think were made worse, like what Lark says to the Windcallers before slaughtering them. But simply put, most of the changes aren't really for better or worse, they're just different, and different doesn't automatically mean bad. I'm not going to try and raise a ruckus that the 7 Wisdoms event is now called the Pursuit of Wisdoms, because I just flat out don't care enough one way or the other to say if this is an improvement or a detriment. Also, just to clarify, I have no idea if any of the changes made them closer or further from the original Japanese script, and I don't even know if the Japanese text got its own share of updates. I am purely comparing the English script between the original and remastered versions. Although, artifacts are now actually called that straight out instead of being labeled AF, so can we get an F in the comments for AF? And while we're on that subject, let's take a moment to ask the question that gamers just have to know.
Was anything censored?
Arguably, yes. One of the most notable differences is that the character Hamson now has a bunch of facial hair instead of his big lips. And in the event Drowned Dreams, when Basketfish asks about the dancer Revanchi, in the original game, Mr. Modi tells him, her dancing is even sexier than before. But in the remaster, he says, her dancing is even better than before. So obviously, this means that the remaster has been tainted by the SJW censor police and isn't worth being played by anybody, and obviously I'm being sarcastic, and if anyone out there genuinely worries about that sort of stuff, please seek help. Joining Toto on his quest to find the Monastery are his beloved pets. We've got Doofus Jr., the rabbite who followed in his father's footsteps of not accomplishing much of anything, Frolfball the Basilisk, whose special skills made my enemies stoned, And my two favorites, Stabatha the Daneslave and Alicia the Succubus. I like her because she's kinda kooky and oozy. I actually tried feeding my pets and raising their stats with crops this time around, and I will say, a Daneslave is a really good pet to have if you want something that runs in and attacks nearly non-stop, because Stabatha is a beast. Oh yeah, speaking of, poltergeist eggs are now called Magicali. Again, one of those changes that I just had to get used to. And on the subject of combat, let's finally get to one of this remaster's biggest selling points. You now have the power to turn optional combat encounters on or off at nearly any place in time. Truth be told, I did leave combat on most of the time, since you are still going to want to fight things for experience points, learning new abilities, and filling out the monster encyclopedia, all of which are important for reasons I'll get to later. But do you all remember how I said fighting the exact same enemies in the exact same spot every single time you entered a room got a little tedious? Well hey, now one of my biggest criticisms from the original game is a non-issue. Being able to turn off the combat is an amazing addition. If you want to just go grab an egg from one of the dungeons, you can get in and out so much faster. If you're doing an event that involves a lot of running back and forth, like the Nordic Snowfield, or the Snowfield Fairies, as it's now called, you can save yourself a lot of time by turning those fights off. But to me, the best way to illustrate why this is such a great feature is the party member, Sierra. This knife-wielding Chihuahua cutie is one of my favorite party members, but one that I truthfully rarely use. Why? Because in order to get her to join you, you have to run all the way through the White Forest, pick her up, and then head all the way back out. Assuming you know the perfect route to take to get to her, this means a minimum of 10 battles round trip. And if you're going for the Little Cactus Diaries, where you have to abandon your party member at the end of every event, it used to be a major pain to go get Sierra every single time, but not anymore. Head to the White Forest, turn encounters off, and you'll be in and out so much faster. And of course, the combat that is there is still as fun as ever, with the game giving us a variety of different weapons, special techniques, and abilities which make it feel like a beat-em-up. However, just like last time, I do recommend playing this game with a friend if you're able, so you can say stuff like, hey, don't knock the enemy out of the range of my special attack. Again? Elazul? Seriously, it was the same boss too! Another feature highlighted in that Nintendo Direct debut was the inclusion of a remastered soundtrack, which I happily used throughout my playthrough. All the arranged tracks are perfectly fine. I really can't think of any that were noticeably worse. Some I didn't even notice the changes at all until certain instruments chimed in. And if I had to award a highlight for best arrangement, it'd definitely go to Calmly Traveling, the track that plays in the ruins and desert. I definitely found myself vibing a lot more with the remastered version of this particular track. But come on, it's Legend of Mana, the game that I'm pretty sure I'm on record saying is one of the best soundtracks in all of video games. You really can't go wrong with either soundtrack option, but it's cool that the option to swap back and forth between them is there, as well as the option to just listen to any of the tracks anytime you want. One other big thing I want to talk about with Legend of Mana Remastered is for those of you playing on PS4 or Steam, because this time around, we've got trophies. This is actually why this video took me a little longer than I initially expected to get out, because I figured there wasn't much point in me talking about this updated version until I had that Platinum trophy and full bragging rights. Now, truthfully, the trophies in this game are perfectly fine. You've got some pretty basic and simple ones, like completing certain character story paths, getting your first Little Cactus Diary, or making your first golem, which I did in the form of S3X69 here. I'm still not good at making golems. Then there are some that take a little bit more work, like having over 100,000 lucre, or growing one of every type of produce, and lastly the really big ones like learning every single special technique, getting to level 99, and beating the game on a playthrough where you have done all 67 events in one playthrough. I wouldn't necessarily describe any of these trophies as hard to get, it might just take you a bit of time and keeping a guide handy for that complete run. Not counting the Platinum trophy, you can actually get all but 2 of them on your very first playthrough. There's one trophy that involves filling out every encyclopedia in your study, and one for playing the game on No Future mode, which is the hard mode where every single enemy is level 99. This trophy, though, I'll say is a little disappointing. It's literally just play the game on No Future mode, as in you can just turn it on, get the trophy, and turn it off. I think I'd have felt it was a bit more earned if there'd been a trophy for beating the game on No Future mode. And then, of course, there's that trophy, Crustacean Crusher. Legend of Mana Remastered has issued an official challenge for me to finally accomplish what I haven't once been able to do in 20 years. Crush 32 crabs at the beach. Now, sure, you could argue it's much less of an accomplishment to pull this off in the remaster, since 1, you can turn encounters off, and you can also just save in between rooms, allowing you to take as many mulligans as you want if you mess up in a room, but... Look, I finally earned the baby penguin! I would kill for you. Beyond all that, Legend of Mana Remastered is loaded with little extras. Remember how in my last video I said there was a secret scene if you have saved data from Saga Frontier 2 on your memory card? Well, this game just has it available for everyone, and it was so cool finally getting to experience it for myself. It's a fun little callback to the Chobin Hoods from the very first Niccolo event. Also, did you know there was a special scene and piece of equipment for having Chocobo racing data on your card? I didn't, and I love Chocobo racing. I laughed my butt off when I first discovered the scene by accident. And how could I possibly forget about Ring Ring Land, the brand new minigame exclusive to this remaster that's like a combination of Tamagotchi and those little games you could play with that detachable Dreamcast controller thingy-mabob. Well, it turns out I could quite easily forget about it. Maybe it becomes something bigger the more you actually play it, but from what I played, which I will admit was very, very little, it's a very simplistic game where you roll a die, get into battles that are determined with another roll of the die, and you get experience, I guess? I'm not sure what the total progression of this game is. The one neat feature I did discover with Ring Ring Land is that it can be used to basically trade pets from one save file to another. See, I actually streamed a bit of this game over on Twitch and tried out Ring Ring Land with Failure the Tonpole. Even though I later saved over that file, Ring Ring Land has its own separate save data, so I was able to bring Failure into my current game, which is pretty cool. Alright, but let's stop beating around the bush and let's go back to that original question. Do I think Legend of Mana Remastered is the definitive way to play this game? Has it surpassed the original in my eyes and become my favorite version of my favorite game? Honestly, yes. Any minor complaints I have are more than balanced out by the things I think the remaster does better. Changes to the script I didn't really like are balanced out by the changes I did like. Any minor complaints I have here, like a slightly awkward gap between the window border and character portrait, are such small potatoes when looking at the realization that this game added such a monumental feature like being able to turn off the combat. I got to experience the stories I fell in love with in a slightly new way through the new localization. But everything else I loved about the game was still here, and anything that I would say is gone isn't really something I'm going to miss. So unless you're really attached to Hamsun's lips or Gaia being called Gaius, I think this remaster is absolutely perfect for veteran players like myself. And if you're someone who still hasn't played this game, this is the ideal place for you to jump right in. Legend of Mana is my favorite video game of all time. I like to think I made that clear last year, and I'm so incredibly thankful so many people watched that video and shared their own love for the title with me. And I'm happy to say that, yeah, Legend of Mana Remastered is, in my opinion, the best version of a game that already means so much to me in the first place. With this remaster, the upcoming anime, a new console title in the works, and even the recent announcement of the mobile title, Echoes of Mana, I don't really think there's been a better time to be a Series of Mana fan than right now. If you're still watching at this point, I want to say thank you for letting me indulge in my Legend of Mana fix for a second time. I had an absolute blast playing this remaster, and I think I can safely say this will be my go-to version of the title from here on out. But what about all of you? Do you think this version lives up to the original? What funny nicknames did you give your pets? Who's your favorite party member? Do you think this game is dumb? Whatever your thoughts are, please share them with me down below, and until I decide to dive into that wacky manga or do an episode-by-episode series of the upcoming anime, I guess I'm done talking about Legend of Mana for a while. Hey everyone, thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, be sure to click like, but if you really liked it, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. Extra special thanks to all my friends and loved ones over on Patreon, which you can pledge to today to see your own name in these ending credits. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, take care.